It was a harsh winter night. The rustling of the cold wind felt as bitter as hunger itself. Inside a small hut, a flickering lamp trembled, much like the heart of a father watching his sleeping children. Their innocent faces seemed to be dreaming of bread even in their sleep. Baba Farid took a deep, cold breath. He looked at his rough hands, marked with scars from years of cutting wood. He looked toward the sky, his eyes filled with tears, and spoke softly to Allah. "Oh my Allah, you did not send me back empty-handed today. We had 2 dry pieces of bread. But my Lord, the children are small, and their patience is still weak. Give my faith such strength that their hunger does not become my weakness. You say that you provide rizq even to an ant inside a stone. Then how can I lose hope? The promise of rizq is yours, and the will to work is mine." This story belongs to an old era, a time when there was a blessing in the land and the fear of Allah in hearts. Farid was a poor woodsman. His home was a tiny hut made of mud walls and a roof of palm leaves. Every day before the Fajr prayer, he would pick up his old axe and walk miles into the thick forest. Farid's wife Zohra was a woman who never complained. She knew her husband worked with all his heart. It was simply a time of testing from Allah. Whenever there was no food, she would distract the children with stories until they fell asleep, and she would drink water and thank Allah. One afternoon, Farid sat under an old tree. The sun was blazing and sweat dripped from his forehead into the soil. For lunch, he had only a single dry piece of bread, which he soaked in water to make it soft enough to eat. He thought to himself, "People say a man writes his own destiny. But is this sweat, this exhaustion, this dirt, is it not enough? Yet, we only receive what Allah has written in our destiny." In the same kingdom lived Prince Daniel. He was raised within the cold marble walls of the royal palace on beds of velvet. To him, rizq meant an endless feast of roasted meat, honey, and rare fruits. Daniel had a different philosophy. He believed that power, authority, and intelligence were the only ways to gain wealth. He often said in his court, "The poor are poor because they are weak. If they fought, if they took what they wanted, or if they were smart like me, they would never sleep hungry. Wealth is the result of human effort and the kindness of kings like me." One day, Prince Daniel went out for a hunt. Dressed in royal robes and mounted on a fine horse, he lost his way and ended up in the part of the forest where Farid was working. Hearing the sound of horse hooves, Farid looked up. A handsome young man stood before him, his face full of pride. Prince Daniel pulled his horse's reins and looked at Farid's torn shirt. With a mocking smile, he said, "Old man, are you wasting your life in this burning sun for a single piece of dry wood? Looking at you, it seems your entire life's earnings are less than what I spend on my horse in a single day." Farid calmly set his axe down, wiped the sweat from his brow and said, "Prince, you speak the truth about your wealth. But I do not have royal horses. I have these 2 hands that my Allah gave me. And these hands provide me exactly what Allah has written in my destiny." Prince Daniel felt irritated by this and raised his voice. "Destiny? This talk of destiny is just an excuse for the weak. Look at me. I have everything because my father's sword conquered this kingdom and my intelligence rules it. Rizq comes from hard work, power, and authority, not from destiny." Farid looked at the prince with eyes full of a peaceful light and spoke softly. "Prince, I also work hard, perhaps harder than your soldiers. But rizq is not the price of hard work. It is a gift from Allah. If it came only from hard work, every laborer would be a king, and every lazy rich man would starve. Yet, we see many wise people struggling for a single meal, while many simple-minded ones sit in palaces." Angered, Prince Daniel challenged him. "You, a simple woodsman, dare to teach me? If your Allah is the provider, why are you so poor? Why do your children go hungry, and why are the walls of your home crumbling?" A strange spark appeared in Farid's eyes, a mix of sorrow and deep faith. He replied, "Prince, poverty is my test, and wealth is yours. My Allah tests my patience by giving me little, and He tests your gratitude and generosity by giving you much. But remember, He has promised rizq to every living soul on this earth. If He wills, He can turn dust into gold, and if He wills, He can turn gold into ashes." Farid's words shook the prince to his core, but his ego refused to accept that a poor man could be wiser than him. He gave a cold laugh and said, "Fine, Woodsman. If your trust in Allah is so strong, I give you a challenge. I want to see how your Allah provides for you when you have no chance to work at all." Farid looked at the prince in surprise. The prince continued, "From tomorrow, you will not come to the forest. I will station my soldiers outside your hut. You cannot leave your house, you cannot work, and you cannot beg from anyone. I will see how bread reaches your home for the next 3 days. If your faith is true, your Allah will provide from the unseen. But if you starve, you must admit that risk is only in a man's own power and effort." Farid fell silent. He thought of the little eyes at home waiting for him. Then, gathering his courage, he said, "I accept your test, Prince. My risk is in the hands of my Allah, not in your restrictions. If a single grain is written in my destiny, it will reach me even if it has to leap over walls." The prince rode away quickly, leaving a cloud of dust behind. Farid stood there alone, his axe lying on the ground. The sun was setting, and the darkness was slowly wrapping the forest in its embrace. When Farid reached home, his wife Zora happily told him that a neighbor had sent a little flower. But Farid's heart was heavy. He knew that from tomorrow, soldiers would be standing outside. He hugged his children, who had no idea that the most difficult test of their lives was about to begin. Suddenly, the sound of galloping horses echoed in the street. Farid peeked through the window. The prince's soldiers had surrounded the hut. Their swords shimmered in the moonlight. Farid smiled, spread his prayer mat, and whispered in his heart, "O my Allah, I have made this deal in your name. You have never disappointed me before. Now my honor is in your hands." The cold forest winds struck Farid's mud hut, sounding like a sad song. Outside, 2 of Prince Daniel's soldiers stood guard with drawn swords. Their orders were strict. "Farid shall not go out, and no one shall enter." Inside, the stove was cold. Farid saw that Zora had placed a pot of plain water on the fire just to distract the children, making them believe food was cooking so they would eventually fall asleep while waiting. Farid approached Zora and whispered, "Zora, what did you tell the children? Do they understand?" Zora wiped her tearful eyes with her veil and said, "I told them that today angels would bring us food, so they must wait a little." "But Farid, why are these soldiers outside? What is our crime?" Farid looked down and replied, "This is not a crime, Zora. It is a test. The prince believes that risk provision is in his power, but I am certain that risk is in the hands of my Allah. Today, we must pay the price for our faith." The sun rose, but inside Farid's home, the ray of hope felt weak. The children sat in a corner, exhausted by hunger, staring at one another. His youngest son, barely 5 years old, came to Farid, pulled his shirt, and asked, "Father, have the angels lost their way? Since last night, my stomach has been hurting from hunger." Farid's heart broke. He picked up his son, kissed his forehead, and said, "No, my dear child, angels never lose their way. They only bring what Allah commands. Have a little patience. Our Allah is always with those who are patient." Meanwhile, in the palace, Prince Daniel sat at a massive table covered with rare fruits. He asked his minister, "What is the news of that woodsman? Has he broken yet? Has he begged the soldiers for mercy?" The minister bowed and said, "No, Prince, that man is strange. He sits silently in prayer. His children are crying, but there is no complaint on his face." The prince mocked, "It has only been 1 day. When the fire of hunger reaches his bones, his trust in Allah will turn to ashes. I want to see how bread drops into his house without the door ever opening." By the 3rd night, the silence in the house was so deep that even the sound of breathing echoed. The children had fallen into a heavy sleep from exhaustion. Their faces had turned pale. Zora sat in a corner, her head bowed, weeping silently, but she did not utter a single word of complaint. Farid stood up and walked to the corner of the house where he always prayed. He placed his head in prostration, sajda. His body was trembling as he whispered his plea. "O my Allah, you know the secrets of every heart. I am not being stubborn. I only wish to protect the honor of your name. A prince has challenged your treasures. My Lord, I am a sinner, but these innocent children, I ask you for the sake of their hunger. Do not let me be humiliated before the world." If you do not send provision today, it is not just a poor man who loses, but the belief that you are the provider will be shaken. My Allah, show your miracle." That night, Farid wept so much that his prayer mat was soaked with tears. He eventually fell asleep right there in prostration. The next day, at the time of Fajr, dawn, before the darkness had fully cleared, a loud thud was heard on the roof. It sounded as if something heavy had been thrown from above. Farid's eyes snapped open. He saw that a part of the old mud roof had weakened and crumbled, but along with the dirt, an old cloth bag had fallen to the floor. Zohra woke up too. With trembling hands, Farid picked up the bag. When he opened it, they were both stunned. Inside were old gold coins and rare pieces of jewelry. Zohra asked in disbelief, "Farid, what is this? Where did it come from?" Farid looked up at the roof. In reality, this was a very old hut that must have belonged to a wealthy man long ago who had hidden his life savings inside the ceiling. Years passed, the man died, and the hut eventually came to Farid. But the treasure remained hidden. Today, when Farid cried out to Allah, Allah made that very roof the source of his relief. Farid wept and said, "Zohra, this is the answer from my Allah. He brought forth rizq from the very walls." At that exact moment, there was a knock at the door. Prince Daniel was there himself. He wanted to see Farid's condition. The soldiers opened the door. As the prince entered, he saw Farid and his wife in sajda with a bag of gold coins lying before them. The prince turned pale. He asked in shock, Where did this come from? My soldiers were standing outside. No one entered. Not even a bird could fly in." "Farid, who sent this?" Farid stood up. There was no exhaustion on his face anymore, only a divine light. He looked at the prince and spoke softly. "Prince, you close the paths, but my Lord is the maker of paths. You placed soldiers at the door, but Allah sent rizq through the roof. If the Lord can feed a worm trapped inside a stone, would he ever forget the children of Farid?" Prince Daniel's ego crumbled into dust. He sat down, looked at the coins, and then took Farid's hands into his own. With tearful eyes, the prince said, "Farid, please forgive me. I used to think that I wrote the destiny of my people, but today I have seen that the pen of destiny is in someone else's hand. I closed your door, but he opened your roof. I thought I was testing you, but in reality, Allah was testing me." Farid spoke with deep wisdom. "Prince, a human being is merely a means. When a king gives to someone, it is by the command of Allah, and when a king stops someone's provision, that too is Allah's command, to remind man of his true humble place. Neither you nor I are the providers. The only provider is Allah." From that day on, the prince opened the gates of his palace to the poor. Farid's children finally ate until they were full. As they slept that night, Farid stroked their hair and whispered, "Always remember, my children, when all the doors of the world close, do not lose hope, because where the limits of man end, the mercy of Allah begins." Zohra looked at Farid, and together they performed a prostration of gratitude. The forest winds were still blowing, but they no longer sounded sad. They carried a sense of peace, the kind of peace that only comes from total trust in Allah. While Prince Daniel's heart had changed, the atmosphere of the palace remained the same. The royal minister, who was jealous of the respect Farid was receiving, began to whisper in the prince's ear. One evening, the minister said craftily, "My prince, the treasure Farid found was merely a coincidence, but does he truly care for the pain of others? He is happy in his own poverty, but can he sacrifice his ego to feed the hungry? A truly noble man is one who changes himself for the sake of others." Prince Daniel fell for the minister's words and decided to play one last emotional move to test Farid's sincerity. The prince summoned Farid to the royal court. When Farid entered, wearing his torn shirt and carrying his old axe on his shoulder, he saw piles of silk, bags of gold coins, and large trays of delicious food set before him. The prince looked Farid in the eye and said, "Farid, you taught me to have faith in Allah, but now I want to make you the guardian of my kingdom. All this treasure, these royal storehouses, and this authority belong to you. You can end the poverty of your entire village in a single day. But I have one condition." The prince paused and then said, "From today, you must leave this axe. You will no longer work. You will no longer cut wood. Instead, you will live as the master of this royal treasure and help the people. Tell me, Farid, do you love your hard work more or the hungry people of your village?" Silence fell over Farid's face. He looked at the shining keys and the piles of gold. Then, with great respect, he bowed his head and said, "Prince, your condition is very heavy. Grant me just one night to think about this." The prince was surprised by Farid's hesitation. He nodded and said, "Fine, Farid. This palace, this treasure, and these keys will wait for you here. I want your answer with the first ray of the sun tomorrow morning." Farid walked back to his hut with heavy steps. On his way, he saw the sorrow of his village. He saw a child suffering from a high fever, an old woman with no roof over her head, and many young men sitting in despair because they had no work. A powerful storm raged in Farid's heart. "If I accept the prince's offer, everyone's troubles will end. Zora won't have to patch her torn clothes anymore, and the children will never have to eat dry bread again." As soon as he reached home, he told Zora everything. For a moment, a spark of hope lit up her eyes. But then, she fell silent. She looked at Farid's rough hands, covered in deep scars and marks from years of cutting wood. She asked softly, "Farid, if we take this treasure, will you still pick up your axe tomorrow morning?" Farid replied with a heavy heart, "That is the struggle, Zora. The prince's condition is that I must give up my path of hard work. He believes that true peace lies in comfort and charity." Farid could not sleep that night. He sat outside his hut until dawn. On one side was the comfort of the palace and an easy way to help others. On the other side was his hard work and self-respect. He thought, "If I give up the path of labor today, every young man in my village will learn to beg. I might fill their stomachs, but I will kill their dignity." The Fajr call to prayer echoed. Farid stood up, performed his ablution, wudu, and kissed his old axe after cleaning it. When he reached the court, Prince Daniel was waiting on his high throne. The minister smiled mockingly and asked, "Well, Woodsman, have you come to trade your poverty or to take the keys to the palace?" Farid walked toward the prince, picked up the keys lying on the royal table, and placed them back into the prince's hand. The entire court fell into a stunned silence. There were tears in Farid's eyes, but his voice was as firm as a rock. He said, "Prince, all night I stood between two paths. One path filled the stomach, but the other kept the soul alive. If I had taken your keys, I would have become the richest man in my village, but the Farid, who believed in Allah's promise to provide for even an ant inside a stone, would have died." He stepped forward, looked the prince in the eye, and continued, "Prince, wealth gained by stretching out one's hand can build houses, but it cannot build character. I do not want to teach my children to knock on a palace door when they are hungry. I want to teach them to pick up an axe, trust their Lord, Allah, and work the earth. Half a piece of bread earned with honor is 1,000 times better than a royal feast eaten with humiliation." Prince Daniel stood up from his throne. His eyes held a level of respect for Farid that he had never felt even for a great conqueror. He looked at his courtiers and announced loudly, "Listen, everyone. Until today, I thought the one with wealth was the only giver. But today, Farid has taught me that the truly rich person is the one whose needs are few and whose faith is high. Farid, by rejecting my kingdom's wealth, you have shown me the meaning of true kingship." The prince immediately ordered his minister to stop giving out free charity. Instead, he ordered the building of small workshops and wells in the village so that every person could learn to earn with dignity, just like Farid. As Farid stepped out of the royal court, the first light of the morning sun struck his axe, making it shine brightly. He did not head toward his hut. Instead, he walked straight toward the forest. He knew that today his children would once again eat dry bread, but he also knew that the taste of that bread would be sweeter than ever before. It wasn't a meal of someone's favor or charity. It was the fruit of his own sweat and his unwavering faith in Allah. Zora stood at the door waiting for him. She saw Farid's empty hands and let out a peaceful smile. She felt no sadness for her husband's poverty. Instead, she felt an immense pride in his honor and his self-respect.